G'day folks, I thought I'd come out here today. I'm doing a bit more work out here and in this area known as Rocky Point. It's a sort of part of the Hurdle Flat gold diggings which run back through to Stanley and head towards Yakandanda. So it's fairly isolated, out in the middle of nowhere. But why I came out here and particularly stopped is I want to show you something that's particularly significant as part of Goldfields history. If you look sort of behind me here, you can see there's a bit of what looks like an oven or kiln or furnace or something. But in fact, a well-known Beechworth baker some years ago said it was a baker's oven. He couldn't be more wrong. What we've got here is the Reverberatory Furnace that was once used by a mining company called the Homeward Bound Mine. And it's interesting, there's 3 homeward bound mines in this area. So obviously they're all keen to get the hell out of here and get back home to England or wherever they came from. But this one at Rocky Point's particularly significant. It was a very deep mine, 840 feet from the top of the shaft to the bottom. At 440 feet below the surface, there's a tunnel that joins the shaft. And they would use that tunnel not for mining, but to bring the ore out, the quartz that contained the gold. And they bring it out. They're up behind me, and this is all very overgrown, so you have to just use your imagination more than a little bit. But in the area behind me here, there was a crushing battery, a stamper battery. Evil devices, they made a lot of noise, they crushed the rock to dust virtually, and then they would normally wash that crushed quartz and extract the gold. The problem in this area was a mineral type called sulfides. There were lots of sulfides here. Sulfides consist of pyrite, arsenical pyrites, iron pyrites, and various other types of minerals that cause difficulty recovering gold. So the process they used here at the Rocky Point mine was to roast the ore. So to do that, you can't just build a fire and chug it in a tub and cook it up. You need a really hot fire, but you don't want the flame going directly onto the mineral that you're trying to roast. So in the furnace here, the Reverberatory Furnace, they bring the ore from the crushing battery, which is back here, bring it down here. In the end, you see right here beside me, you can see here that there's an opening. This is the firebox for the furnace. And of course, out the bottom, they rake out the coals when they're finished. So they stoke up a really, really hot fire. And that hot fire would cast hot air, not straight out, but along the furnace. And as we go around the corner, hopefully you can see this a little bit easier. You can see along the sides here that there's actually a couple of openings. So what the miners would do is they would shovel the ore, the gold-bearing sand, if you want to call it that, with the sulfides and everything in it, and they would shovel it in through an opening. There's one just here. You can see this one's complete. This one has been pulled apart, probably by people thinking, oh, there might be still gold. And they probably climbed in there and scraped it out, and they're lucky the whole thing didn't fall on their heads. But it's still very, very intact, and in fact, most of the bricks that were here are lying around on the ground, sort of behind and around where I am now. It's fairly well protected, as you can see. It's got a nice mop of grass on the top of it, and that's probably done this kiln a favour. It's probably stopped it being pulled to pieces by souvenir hunters and things like that. It is fairly isolated. It took me a little bit of time to re-find it this morning because it's grown over so much. So the ore was placed inside. Hot fire at that end, really hot air coming across the top. And then at this end, and it's sadly fallen down, this end there was a chimney, a flue. So the air came in, the hot air from the fire at that end, in across the top of the ore, out here and up through the chimney. And that would roast the pyrites and get the pyrites out of the ore. It would vaporize. Then the gold that was in there in the quartz could simply be processed and the gold easily extracted. Now, how do they get it out? Because they've already crushed the rock. They've already now roasted the rock, but they still need to get that gold out of the sand and the quartz. So what they did was just over here a little further. There's an area, and we won't go there today. It's overgrown, and there's nothing really to see with all the bracken and stuff that's here. But in this area over here to my left, there were 3 round wooden vats. Now, in the very early days, they used a process called chlorination. And chlorination was where they made chlorine gas. They introduced it to the wooden vats, the ore, the rock, the stone that's been crushed, and the pyrites and everything that's been removed. All that was placed into the wooden vats. a lid put on and sealed, and they'd introduce chlorine gas into that solution, and that would actually dissolve the gold. So the gold dissolved, it disappeared, it went into a liquid form. They would then extract that liquid, and using zinc shavings, they could then precipitate the gold. The gold would drop out through a special box and a process. I won't get too technical here, but they drop the gold out using zinc, scrape it all out, put it into a small furnace, fire it, smelt it is in fact the term they used, and then they would actually have their gold in the bottom of their crucible. So it was a fairly lengthy and arduous process. They used chlorination for a little while, and then very quickly they turned around to the age-old cyanide process, which we hear about today, and which is slowly these days being replaced, ironically, by the halox or chlorine process once again, because chlorination is a lot safer to people and the environment than what the cyanide process is. Cyanide's been really frowned upon. It's pretty deadly. If you get a taste of that stuff or a whiff of that stuff, you've got about 4 seconds, and then you go and meet your maker. So I thought I'd bring you out here. You can see the bush, it's overgrown, it's quite thick, it's quite rugged. As we sort of spin around here, you can see that the furnace is still here just behind us. And I love this. I think this is just a beautiful, intact part of Gold Rush history. And this is looking at it from the other end, from the flue or chimney end. What's really interesting with this site is I was very, very fortunate. And after the bushfires that came through here in 2003, this site was laid bare, completely bare. There was nothing, just bare scorched earth. Some trees were still smouldering. I got my wife to drop me off some kilometres from here and walked in. It was impossible to drive in. There was fallen timber across the track everywhere. And I was able to come in here and actually see this site completely laid bare as it was. You can see where the old crushing battery was. In fact, there were 2 crushing batteries here. There's still some cast iron metal and things like that laying around. There were little sluices, there were little contraptions that people had used so that later, after this is all finished and the big mine's gone, hatters, as they were called, people who worked on their own. I'm a bit of a hatter when it comes to mining. I prefer it that way. And hatters would come out here and go through the tailings, go through the stuff left over, get the bits that the old timers missed or dropped or whatever else, and probably made a good few dollars out of it. So it's a lovely site out here. Having seen the site, I know where the assayer's office was, where they would take samples of the quartz and assay it and do tests. Where the mine managers' huts were, there was a small village out here where they actually lived out here in the bush. Fairly rugged ground. As you can see, it's quite steep. Takes a bit to get in. It's going to take me a bit to get out again. But that's the way it is. And, you know, it's just one of those places that you come to and you think, yeah, it's preserved forever. It's overgrown again. It's a pity, because it would have been really, really nice if the powers that be that manage our crown land and parks in this country actually bothered to just even spray this immediate area to keep this available for people to come out and see. But sadly they didn't. They've let it grow back. Mother Nature's taken over. But with a bit of luck, you know, maybe down the track something will happen and it'll at least be preserved, even just put a roof over it or something, a steel structure or whatever to stop trees falling on it. We've lost too much of our history for exactly that reason, things falling over old structures and they're gone forever. So just a bit of a reasonable video today. It's taken a little bit longer. I probably bored you to death. That's the way it is. If you don't like it, don't watch them. But anyway, I just thought I'd do this for this morning. I've got to go out and find some more minerals now. So I'll leave you all to go back to your lattes and cappuccinos, and I'll talk to you again with the next video. Thank you.